Today we're going to discuss what happened in Game 6, what led to it being such a close game, what changes the Heat took in order to make sure that it wasn't the blowout that we saw in Games 4 and 5, and then ultimately what to look forward to in Game 7. The main concept we talked about last video was the idea that Boston was going small. So in order to counteract, the Heat in the second half of Game 5 decided to go small as well, now starting Kevin Love. And to begin this game, who is not here, we can see that Kevin Love did not only not start, but he didn't play in Game 6 because the Heat recognized the value of going with the more athletic group of players, and they thought that provided a greater benefit. The biggest thing that each team benefits from in going in these small lineups is the fact that they don't have any real liabilities on defense. They have 5 athletic defenders that can guard pretty well one-on-one. When Derek White is your worst defender, Derek White maybe is your worst defender, it bodes pretty well. And the fact that you have 3 really exceptional defenders on the floor at all times really makes it much easier on defense. Anyway, in the first quarter, getting Bam Adebayo to settle for mid-range contested jump shots is a win for the Boston defense. We saw a 104-105 game, which is significantly lower scoring on both sides because essentially we're seeing better defense from both sides. So here's another good example. Boston plays good defense, gets a deflection off the knee. However, that being said, Boston's been playing pretty good defense, so that really hasn't changed much. The big difference is Miami. Boston's been putting up big numbers against Miami, and so Miami holding Boston to 105 and one of them coming obviously on a last-second shot means they're playing much better defense. As we talked about in the last video, having Marcus Smart shoot mid-range contested jumpers is probably not the most efficient offense, so that's a win for win for Miami. Having no Kevin Love on the floor means you have 5 athletic where Bam Adebayo is your maybe biggest weakness, and so trying to target it but working to get aggressively over the pin down is going to cause an errant pass, and Miami gets the ball again. And lastly, in this sequence, they're going to ultimately try and target Bam Adebayo, trying to pick on the weaker defenders, but this just goes to show why they're not really weak defenders anymore you can pick on. You have athletic bodies all the way around, it leads to a turnover, and a Miami layup in transition. So then let's look at some clips from Boston and Miami both and who they did attempt to target essentially on defense. So here we can see with Robert Williams in the game, they are attempting to get Bam Adebayo in the against Jason Tatum, who is probably Boston's best offensive player. And this does ultimately result in a layup for Boston, and I anticipate them going to that more. However, it's not a given. The second example we're going to look at comes in the last play of the quarter. I think this is something we're more likely to see come up more. So first off, we can see that over here, this Duncan Robinson is essentially who they're trying to target. Boston does a great job of getting Marcus Smart and Grant Williams to switch here, so that way they can ultimately have Marcus Smart come set the screen. They take Kyle Lowry out of there, so there's no one else that can come to the screen. It's just Duncan Robinson, and they attempt to essentially isolate against Duncan Robinson, but Jimmy Butler we can see is helping aggressively off Marcus Smart, and the Heat play pretty good defense by and large. So then who do the Heat try and target on the other side? And the answer is they try to target Robert Williams. This is the same basic concept that they tried, except before Boston was going big, now they went small. They essentially aren't able to target him in the beginning. But when Robert Williams does come in, which he will come in at some point, they run action to try and get a guard going downhill, one-on-one. That creates an advantage. I love this little screen. Downhill, one-on-one, Miami layup. And on the following possession, Miami pushing it in transition. Here we can see Jimmy Butler gets the matchup that he wants against Robert Williams again. The Heat are going to essentially put 3 bodies over here in the corner and then a good shooter up in the near side corner. And all this does is give space for Jimmy Butler to attack one-on-one, which is going to create a good situation for them to either get scored or a foul, which is what happens in this situation. So then in conclusion, we saw a major shift after Game 3, which is when Boston went from their big lineup to their small lineup. And then we saw a massive shift between Game 5 and this game that we're watching right now, in that Miami counteracted with going with their small lineup as well. So what I anticipate in Game 7 is the combination of both those things, where we don't really know what each team is going to bring, but now they've had time to prepare. Boston knows exactly what Miami's going to go with, and Miami has now had 3 games to essentially prepare, and they saw what works and what doesn't work in Game 6. So what I anticipate happening is Game 7 to be essentially the most back and forth one yet. Miami kind of had to come from behind in Game 6 to make it close, and then obviously Boston with a last second shot. But I anticipate Game 7 being a back and forth battle, and I look forward to it.